Paraphrasing is rewording, that is, saying the same thing in different words. The cardinal rule, the most important rule of paraphrasing is that you should not change the meaning of the sentence when paraphrasing it. In this video, we'll paraphrase different questions and learn different techniques of paraphrasing through these. There are many different techniques of paraphrasing. Usually we need to use 2 or 3 of these in one question to paraphrase effectively. As we paraphrase one question after another, on your screen will be the question followed by its paraphrasing. Then the main synonyms used in the paraphrasing will be mentioned, and at the bottom of the screen you will see the main paraphrasing techniques used. There are different question types in IELTS writing tasks too. Agree, disagree, advantages, disadvantages, causes, solutions, and a few more. But for the purpose of paraphrasing, I'll divide the questions into 3 categories. As I keep mentioning them, you will see examples of these question types on your screen. A single statement followed by 1 or 2 questions. 2 non-opposing statements followed by 1 or 2 questions. And 2 opposing statements followed by 1 or 2 questions. Because the focus of paraphrasing is the statement and not the question, I'll mention the statement in full and the rest of the question in short. Let's work on the single statement questions first. The first paraphrasing technique that we'll use is usage of synonyms. IELTS essay questions quite often begin with some people. Instead of some, we can write a few or certain. Certain has a slightly different meaning than some, but in this context, it can replace some. Instead of people, we can write persons or individuals. Depending on what the question is about, there can be other replacements for the word people. These I'll keep discussing as we practice the questions. Another option is to replace some people with some and other people with others. Let's work on the first question now. This question has just one statement. Some people spend most of their lives living close to where they were born. And since the only paraphrasing technique I'm using here is use of synonyms, I'll change it to certain individuals choose to spend majority of their lives residing near their native place. There are some words I have not changed. Let's look at spend. If I'm using the word spend in the context of spending money, I could replace it with use the money to buy. For example, instead of saying, youngsters spend money on gadgets, I could say, youngsters use the money to buy gadgets. Instead of spend money, I could also write expend money, although there is a slight difference in the meanings of these 2 words. If I'm trying to convey that an excessive amount of money is being spent, or too much money is being spent, I could use synonyms of the word such as splurge and squander. If I want to say that people spend a lot of money on parties, I could just say people splurge on parties. But in the question that we just paraphrased, we are talking about spending time, spending lives. None of the synonyms we just mentioned work in this context. If you are unsure about a synonym, do not use it. Do not change the meaning of the question. There are other ways of paraphrasing. Another word that I have not changed is lives. If I Google the synonyms of life, there are quite a few options, but none seem to fit well in this context. So I have chosen to leave it as it is. Another paraphrasing of the same question is, certain individuals choose to settle down near their native place and spend majority of their lives there. In this one, I have divided the thought into 2 parts when paraphrasing it. And I have introduced the collocation, settle down. Here's another paraphrasing of the same question, in which I have used birthplace instead of native place. To convey a large part of one's life, I have used the bulk of, and I have replaced lives with years. Because the word years can sometimes be used to refer to one's age or time of life. Next question now. Plastic bags, plastic bottles, and plastic packaging are bad for the environment. In this, we have 2 words which do not have any good replacements. One is environment and the other is plastic. In the first paraphrasing, I have replaced bad with detrimental, and I have changed the sentence structure a little. This is an example of why it is important to understand the meaning of the question first. Although the question mentions plastic bags, plastic bottles, and plastic packaging, these are all different uses of plastic. These are all plastic products. So in my paraphrasing, I've written all products which are made of plastic, and I could just have written all plastic products, and then followed it up with including bags, bottles, and packaging material. This including here conveys that bags, bottles, and packaging material are just examples of plastic products. So the first paraphrasing technique that we have used is use of synonyms. This is a technique that we'll use in every single paraphrasing we do in combination with other techniques. The second paraphrasing technique that we'll use is changing of the word form. For example, changing a noun to adjective or vice versa. So if I have the word important in my question, the synonym I could use is significant. But I could also change important to importance. To replace important with importance in a sentence, I would need to change the sentence structure. Using this technique, we'll first paraphrase the same question that we just worked on before about plastics. In this one, instead of saying that these products are bad for the environment, I've written that these products cause environmental damage. So I've used a different word form of the word environment, environmental. The next question is, in some countries, more and more people are becoming interested in finding out about the history of the house or building they live in. I've used quite a few synonyms in the paraphrasing, which are listed on your screen. I want to bring to your notice the phrase more and more people. This phrase conveys that the number of people who are interested is increasing, which is why in my paraphrasing I've replaced this phrase with an increasing number of individuals. And I have replaced history with historical background by changing the word form of the word history. While in this one, I've used a synonym of the word interested, that is intrigued. Here is another paraphrasing of the same question in which I've used a different form of the word interested. And with this example, I'm introducing another paraphrasing technique, that is introduction of some information. In this one, I have introduced the phrase in recent times. Because the question says more and more people are becoming interested, it is obvious that we are talking about how interested people are now as compared to before, which is why I have introduced this phrase. Once you read and understand the question properly, there may be times when you'd be able to introduce some phrases, introduce some information when paraphrasing the question. To practice this technique, we go back to the question about plastics. In this case, I've paraphrased the question as, bags, bottles, and packaging material made of plastic cause environmental damage, which is all the more worrisome because of its rampant use. So because I know that plastic is used a lot, I've introduced this information. Rampant refers to something that is spreading uncontrollably, and it usually refers to something negative. Worrisome means something that causes worry. The next paraphrasing technique now, changing the voice. Questions are usually in active voice, so we can change it to passive voice. And if they are in passive voice, obviously we can change it to active voice. The question says, some think the current generation should take steps to protect the environment for the next generation. I have paraphrased it to, it is opined by some that it is our responsibility to ensure that the environment is preserved and protected for future generations. Instead of it is opined by some, I could also have written it is a belief of some people. In this paraphrasing, I can replace the word people with environmentalists. In the beginning of this video, when we were discussing some of the common words in essay questions, one of the words we had discussed was people. It's a word which is often there in the questions, and it's also a word which you may end up using quite a bit in your essay. Sometimes we may not be able to replace this word, except for replacing it with individuals or persons once in a while. However, sometimes when we read a question, we may be able to figure out what kind of people are being talked about. For example, if the question is, some people believe that international news should be taught to students in school. I may not want to replace this word people with educationists or experts, because this is a kind of subject on which the general public may generally express an opinion. However, in this question, because we are talking about protection of environment, you may choose to replace the word people with environmentalists. Here's another example which uses synonyms and change of voice. Also, I have introduced a new phrase, one school of thought. School of thought means a particular way of thinking. So when we say some people think this and other people think that, these are two different schools of thought. Here's another paraphrasing of the same question, in which, besides using synonyms and change of voice, another technique that I've used is use of antonyms. That is the opposite of some word. So instead of saying that something can encourage people to start eating healthy, I can say that it can discourage people from eating unhealthy. Another noteworthy thing in this paraphrasing is replacement of unhealthy food with food items that have an adverse impact on health. Sometimes when you don't have perfect synonyms, you may replace a shorter phrase with a longer one just explaining it. Here's another example of using the technique of introduction of some information to paraphrase. The statement in the question is pretty short. Weddings are getting bigger and more expensive. However, these words, bigger and more expensive, convey a comparison between present and past. So when paraphrasing, I can write, nowadays weddings have become bigger, or as I have done here, I've written in the last couple of decades. The scale of the celebrations during marriage ceremonies has been expanding at an unprecedented rate. There are two pieces of information I have introduced in this paraphrasing. One is in the last couple of decades, the other is at an unprecedented rate. This I have done from what I know of things in society. I know that there has been a shift towards splurging on things in the last couple of decades, and this change in lifestyle is unlike anything that we have seen before. Introduce information after understanding the question and only if you're sure that it won't change the meaning of the statement. Here's another paraphrasing of the same question where the focus is more on using synonyms. I've also used an idiom in this one, to tie the knot, which means to get married. Here's another paraphrasing of the same question. This question about some people living close to where they were born is what we had started practicing paraphrasing on in this video. Here I have paraphrased it rather differently. The second part of this paraphrasing, a few choose to stay put and reside near their childhood home, is a direct paraphrasing of the given statement. For where a person is born, I had used native place and birthplace before. In this one, I have used childhood home. And I have also used the collocation stay put, which means to remain somewhere without moving. The information that I have introduced in this paraphrasing again comes from my understanding of the society. I know that a lot of people move these days. They may move to different cities, they may move from rural areas to urban areas, and a lot of people are even choosing to move to a different country. So using this information and connecting it to the question, in my paraphrasing, I have mentioned that although it is usually common for people to move these days, some people choose not to do so. Another question here. In advertising, businesses nowadays usually emphasize that their products are new in some way. While paraphrasing, I've used a couple of synonyms, businesses to companies, new to new and innovative, and I've changed the form of a couple of words, emphasize to emphasis and advertising to advertise. Now we start with the second question type, which is two non-opposing statements. In such questions, usually the first statement is given as a fact, and what is mentioned in the second statement happens because of the first statement. And usually you have to agree or disagree with the second one or give the advantages or disadvantages of the second one. For example, in this question, it says that people who are from poor backgrounds or rural backgrounds find it difficult to get university education. This part of the question, that is the first sentence in the question, is given as a fact. This is not what we need to agree or disagree with. we need to either agree or disagree with what is given in the second sentence. So what the question is saying is that because people from poor backgrounds and from rural areas find it difficult to get university education, therefore universities should make it easier for them to get admission there. It is this understanding of the connect between the two statements that we use to paraphrase the question. Once again, there are quite a few synonyms that I've used here. Make a note of them. But the other paraphrasing techniques that I've used are: 1. Addition of a conjunction between the two sentences. I have used consequently between the two sentences. I have also introduced the phrase, it is an undeniable fact, before the first statement. This phrase, it is an undeniable fact, means that something is 100% true. It cannot be denied at all. It is good to use such phrases only if you really understand their meaning properly and then use them accordingly. Here is another example of the same question type. The first statement is given as a fact and the second statement is what you need to agree or disagree with. In this case, the second statement begins with some people think, and I have replaced it with one viewpoint regarding this is. A noteworthy synonym in this one is replacement of important with concerning. Concerning in this case means something which causes concern or something which is problematic. It is not a word that we would usually use as a synonym of important. But in this case, the first statement says languages are dying out, and the second statement says that it is not important. That is, it conveys that it is not a problem that the languages are dying out, which is why I have used the word concerning as a synonym of important in this case. Here's another example. Many manufactured food and drink products contain high levels of sugar, which causes many health problems. Sugary products should be made more expensive to encourage people to consume less sugar. Besides using synonyms and antonyms and changing the word form, I have also added a conjunction between the two sentences, therefore. Now we start with the third question type, which is two opposing statements followed by discuss both these views and give your own opinion. Let's look at this one. Some think that climate change reforms will negatively affect business. Others feel they are an opportunity for businesses. I have connected the two statements by beginning my paraphrasing with people are divided over, and then I have used whether and or to mention the two viewpoints. So the sentence template that we get from this is people are divided over whether and later or. Let's look at another example now. In this one, I have not connected the two sentences into one, but I have added the conjunction however between the two sentences. And instead of the phrases some people believe and others feel in the question, I have used the phrases certain individuals think that and later not everyone agrees to this as they think. Here's another paraphrasing of the same question. In this one, I have joined the two sentences into one by using while. But more importantly, I have changed the sequence of the two viewpoints. In the question, the first viewpoint is that international news should be taught, and the second viewpoint is that it should not be taught. In my paraphrasing, I have reversed this. I've talked about the second opinion first and the first one later. So changing the sequence of whatever is there in the question is another paraphrasing technique. Another paraphrasing of the same question in which I've introduced the phrase, since schools are responsible for imparting knowledge about varied fields, before mentioning the two viewpoints. So I'm basically conveying that because schools should be teaching about everything, they should be teaching about international news as well. Another question here about the importance of music. In this one, the conjunction that I have used is whereas, and the sentence template I would get is certain individuals believe that, and then whereas others disagree and opine that. And although I've used quite a few synonyms here, it is noteworthy that certain words such as music do not have any perfect replacement. When you come across such words, at least in your introductory paragraph, in your first paragraph, leave them and change everything else around them. Later you could find roundabout ways of replacing these words. Here's another question about whether zoos are useful or whether they should be closed. In this, I have changed the sequence of the statements, mentioned the second viewpoint first, something that we have discussed before. I've also used the ing form of a verb, blame, to connect two statements. Instead of saying that certain sections of society demand closure of zoos because they blame them, I have written certain sections of society demand closure of zoos, blaming them. Another point to be noticed in this paraphrasing is the phrase I have introduced in the beginning, it has become a contentious subject. Contentious means something which is very controversial or something over which there is a lot of argument. Just as I had mentioned before when we had discussed the phrase, it is an undeniable fact, the same thing applies here. Understand the phrase, do not use it loosely. When I was writing about whether international news should be taught in schools, I would not have been comfortable using this phrase, it has become a contentious subject or it is a contentious subject. The reason for that is because I don't think it is a viewpoint on which there is a lot of controversy or over which there is a lot of argument going on. But I believe that this subject of whether zoos should remain open or not is a controversial subject. Here's another paraphrasing of the same question in which instead of people, I have used animal rights activists. Once again, I'm doing so with the knowledge that usually those who go out of their way to talk about these topics are animal rights activists. Here's another paraphrasing of the same question which gives us another template for paraphrasing. Not everyone agrees that, followed by one opinion, and then in the next sentence, certain sections of the society believe, followed by the other opinion. And here is the last paraphrasing technique, which is to rewrite the statements as a question. So in this one, we write both the viewpoints in question form, followed by this is something that people argue over, this is something that there are varied opinions over. In this case, I have written, this has become a contentious subject in recent times. And here's another example of the same technique in which I have first written that there are opposing views about this thing, inserted a dash and then written, is it this or is it that? The two viewpoints. The last question that we work on falls under the same category of two opposing statements followed by a question, but the question is discuss both attitudes instead of discuss both views. Attitudes can mean viewpoints, it can also mean the way we behave. The question is about why some people like to try new things and others do not. In this, I have introduced the information during the course of a person's lifetime because clearly the question is about how one leads their life. And in the other paraphrasing of the same question, I have used while to connect the two sentences, but I have started with while rather than using it in the middle of the sentence. To learn how to paraphrase efficiently, you need to understand why you need to paraphrase. The assessment criteria of IELTS Writing Task 2 include 4 components, all of which are equally important. They are on your screen now. Paraphrasing is especially required for the lexical resource criterion because if you change the words, you show the examiner that you know different words. Paraphrasing can also boost your grammar score because effective paraphrasing includes change of sentence structures. This video has focused solely on writing task 2, that is the essay question. However, paraphrasing is required for writing task 1 as well as speaking also. If you guys want, I'll later work on separate videos for these two. When paraphrasing, it may sometimes happen that you would not be able to come up with synonyms for certain words. In such cases, at least make sure that you do not copy any phrases from the question in your essay. A phrase is a group of words. That is, 2 or more words together make a phrase. So try to ensure that you do not use 2 or more words in the same sequence as they are mentioned in the question in your essay. So do not copy any phrases from the question, even if you're using certain words from the question. When practicing paraphrasing, divide the words you come across into two categories: general vocabulary and topic-specific vocabulary. This actually applies to whenever you are practicing writing or speaking. Although you would also need to work on your topic-specific vocabulary as well, focus more on the general vocabulary. That is the words which are more common in the questions, and the words and phrases that you can use in your paraphrasing often. Also, make sure that any word, any phrase that you use, you understand its meaning properly. Here is a list of all the paraphrasing techniques that we have used, and this list has some of the sentence templates from the examples that we have done. Do understand that no tips, tricks, and strategies can help you if you do not understand the question. No memorized phrases can help you if you don't understand the question. So work on that and then use these methods. I have tried my best to make this as thorough as possible and yet as easy to understand as possible. Do tell me if this helped you. If you still find yourself struggling with paraphrasing of any question, leave it in the comments. I'm leaving you with a few questions to practice your paraphrasing technique on. Bye for now. All the very best.